The greatest arc in all of anime is unquestionably, without a shadow of a doubt, the Chimera Ant arc from Hunter x Hunter. It is just a masterful arc of storytelling, and though my opinion on the other Hunter x Hunter arcs varies, the Chimera Ant arc is so great that the anime, and by extension the manga, is worth watching just for this one arc. However, the Chimera Ant arc is not my favourite arc in anime. In fact, my favourite arc belongs to a different shonen anime. Yes, my favourite arc belongs to Bleach. And I think we all know which arc I'm about to bring up. Yes, that's right, my favourite anime arc is the Fullbringer arc from Bleach. Or the Lost Agent arc as it is actually called, although I will only refer to it as the Fullbringer arc in this video. What? Did you expect me to say a different arc? Look, I know most people say the Soul Society arc is the best arc in Bleach, and is also considered one of the best arcs in Shonen, but it is not my favourite arc in Bleach, despite me agreeing that it is a really good arc. I really like the Fullbringer arc because of its uniqueness from other Shonen anime, and for the character development it brings to Ichigo. The Fullbringer arc does something interesting by removing Ichigo's powers. This is not the first time a hero, or even a main character has ever lost their abilities, but Bleach pushes this idea further than I've ever seen done before or since. This is due to the nature of Ichigo's powers. In addition to wielding a powerful sword and having super speed, Ichigo can see dead people. It is the loss of this specific ability that has the most effect on Ichigo. Not only can he no longer fight the monsters that plague his city, he can't even see them, making him completely useless in battle. Even worse, due to not being able to see the dead, Ichigo can no longer see the Soul Reapers that he often fought alongside and bonded with, including fan-favourite character, Rukia. It was a risky decision to essentially remove over half of the Bleach cast, including the second main character, but it was a decision that pays off, not just in progressing Ichigo's character, but also by allowing the spotlight to be shone on some characters who had been pushed to the background over the course of Bleach. Most notably, Chad. Out of all of Ichigo's friends from the normal world who accompany him on his adventures, it is definitely Chad who always got the short end of the stick. Whereas Inoue has always been an important part of Bleach, with an entire arc being kickstarted by a decision she made, and Ishida always having his rivalry with Ichigo, and from what I hear having a prominent role in the 1000-Year Blood War arc, Chad was always just kind of along for the ride. He didn't really add anything to the group, and there often wasn't enough time to spare any development for his character during the bigger arcs, especially with how many big characters were present for those arcs. Fortunately, with a reduced cast, there was a lot more time to focus on Chad, especially since Ishida doesn't play a big role in this arc. It was lovely to see how much Chad cared about Ichigo, and how much their friendship meant to him, and how he was willing to get stronger for Ichigo. One of the complaints often levied at anime, in particular shonen anime, is one of how the stakes are constantly being raised, but end up just making the whole thing fall flat, and making any progress the main character went through feel meaningless. Bleach is somewhat guilty of this, as a lot of the time Ichigo would learn some new ability so that he could beat some villain far more powerful than him, only for the next villain to be even more powerful, so that the ability that he just learned was now essentially useless and doesn't really get used anymore. The Fullbringer arc goes against this by having Ichigo face what may be the weakest villains in the entire Bleach anime, even weaker than the filler villains. I love how the villains actually use their brains to best Ichigo instead of defeating him by force. Personally, I love Ichigo. He's one of my favourite anime characters. Most shonen protagonists are loud, obnoxious, and extroverted. Ichigo is the opposite. Yes, he can be loud and obnoxious, but is often in reaction to something silly that someone else does. Ichigo is far more introverted than most anime characters. I mean, he literally spends most of his free time in his room. It's also where he hangs out with most of the other characters when they're not busy fighting hollows. This also means that Ichigo isn't as expressive with his emotions, at least compared to the other shonen protagonists. I remember when Ichigo lay in his bed trying to calm himself as he worried about the hollow within him trying to take over. Even though he was clearly afraid, he still did his best to push those feelings down so that he could help his friends. That's what I love about Ichigo. He has no plans to become king of the Soul Reapers. He isn't going to be the Hokage of the Soul Society. Ichigo just wants to be powerful enough to protect the people around him, and I love that this core trait of his is used against him in this arc in the anime. With each episode, Ichigo gets closer and closer to the power that he originally had, but his friends and even his family are one by one turned against him by the enemy. In his quest to protect them, he had only brought them even more into harm's way. They had all worked so hard to get stronger for each other, but were now using their newfound strength against the person they cared most about. Everyone that Ichigo loved viewed him as having lost his mind, and in the end he was utterly defeated, bested by foes at any other point in time he could have defeated with just a flick of his wrist. It was genuinely saddening watching Ichigo cry, for what I believe was the first time in the anime, on the floor in the rain. And when I say cry, I don't mean that he got a little teary-eyed, I mean he was genuinely sobbing. This was a man who had lost everything. He had struggled so much to achieve the one thing that he wanted, and had instead nothing to show for it. He had lost his powers once again, this time not from defeating the greatest enemy he had ever come across, but instead having them stolen by the weakest enemy he had ever faced. His friends and family had turned against him and sided with the enemy, believing him to be the one at fault. Ichigo was a broken man, and his friends and family had been broken along with him. I have never seen any other anime character as destroyed as Ichigo was in this one scene, and no matter how quickly it was all resolved, the feelings of the characters does not change. As quick as the resolution is, it is still a satisfactory one. Like I said, Ichigo had struggled so much, even died to protect his friends, and to see his hardships rewarded by the very people he had put his life onto the line to protect was very satisfying. Ichigo had lost the same way the Soul Reaper captains had lost to Aizen. It was now their turn to save him. After spending the equivalent of an entire season without these characters around, it was great to see them again, most notably the reunion between Ichigo and Rukia, but also the return of some fan favourites, mine personally being Toshiro. The return of these characters also highlighted the time jump and also how weak the villains were, with most of them being very quickly dispatched. However, the best part was seeing Ichigo once again at full strength. By this point, I'd seen Ichigo train enough and was more than happy to see him kick some ass. And who better than the guy who tried to rob him of everything that he had cared about? The reason why I love this arc so much might be pretty clear by now, but in case it isn't, it's because of the emotions that all the characters go through. Most arcs in Shonen and in Bleach are about who can punch the hardest, or about how many characters die or how the story progresses. This arc is about slowing things down and taking a deeper look at some of the characters, most notably Ichigo. Ichigo comes across as directionless at the start of this arc, and it is heartbreaking watching as the joy of his newfound purpose gives way to the fear and sadness of losing everything around him. This arc also makes it clear not only how important everyone is to Ichigo, but also how important Ichigo is to everyone else, including the Soul Reapers, who could have easily turned a blind eye to Ichigo's struggles, something that Rukia points out to Ichigo as being something the Soul Society likely would have done in the past. I love this arc so much, and I am glad that when I watched it, the 1000-Year Blood War anime had already been announced, because Ichigo saying to the camera that it will see me soon was very moving. Bleach is one of my favourite anime, and this is my favourite arc out of every anime that I've ever seen, and I'm looking forward to the 1000-Year Blood War anime that will hopefully bring a satisfying conclusion to this amazing anime. That's it. Goodbye.